Well, Woody was aware that he didn't have to go all the way back to the 19th century for stories of black resistance to Jim Crow, fascism. In the late summer of 1949, all he had to do was look across his doorstep to the Hudson River Valley town of Peekskill, Westchester County, New York, where that late summer, that August, the great civil rights activist, singer, actor, all-American athlete, lawyer, overachiever, named Paul Robeson, had agreed to sing a benefit concert for the Civil Rights Congress. Now, he never even made it to the grounds, because for the whole previous week, the Peekskill Evening Star and the Veterans of Foreign Wars and a lot of right-wing organizations and on radio stations were whipping up the townspeople, encouraging them to gather together and express their contempt for Robeson and all his nigger-loving, commie-loving friends from down there in Jew York coming up here telling us how we should think and how we should feel. Robeson's crime, of course, had been to declare in the midst of the Cold War that no African American would, in his right mind, go to war against the Soviet Union. He said he'd lived in the Soviet Union and he was treated a lot better there than many places in the United States. And for expressing that heresy in the midst of the Cold War, he was met with a burning cross on the hill above Peekskill, which kind of proved his point, right? So anyway, he never made it to the grounds because he was blocked by all these masked gangs of rioters, mostly young white teenagers, but also some of their parents. And they blocked the way, and Robeson was kept hidden in the car because he would have been in danger if he got out of the car. So they kept him away, but unfortunately, the gangs descended on the concert goers and started beating him up, and with baseball bats and fence posts and things like that, and chanting, and people were being kicked to the ground. This gentleman being kicked to the ground, you can't really see who he is. His name is Eugene Bullard. He was the world's first African-American combat pilot in World War I. Of course, he couldn't fly for the American Air Force because he was black, so he had to fly for France, right? And that's what they're doing to him at Peekskill. Anyway, and if you listen to the tapes of the Peekskill riots, you hear these gangs shouting, "Give us Robeson, we'll lynch the nigger up," and then Jews, 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 white niggers, you niggers and Jews, go back to Russia, you communists, all that kind of stuff, And anyway, Robeson said that I don't get scared. I don't get scared when fascism comes near to me like it has here at Peekskill. And he said he was going to come back the following week and he would sing that damn concert and he would bring about between 20 and 30,000 of his closest friends, which is what he did. And 2 weeks later, he's back in Peekskill, plants himself beneath this massive lonesome oak tree there, surrounded by a protective ring of union organizers and veterans. Not all the vets were against him, right? And they were prepared to take a bullet in the belly or the back because the rumors were that there were snipers' nests up in the trees trying to take pot shots at Robeson. Well, he sang the concert, came off pretty well, except that his stage was buzzed by FBI helicopters trying to drown out the music. Woody Guthrie was there, along with Pete Seeger and Lee Hayes, also of the Almanac Singers and the Weavers. And as I said, the concert, well, they were able to complete the concert. The trouble didn't start until afterwards, when the Westchester County Police shepherded all the concert goers down one road, one exit road. There were a number of roads they could have taken, but they let them go out only one. And isn't it interesting that already at the waiting were masked gangs? It was a gauntlet. And at staging posts every couple hundreds of yards. There were more gangs with boulders piled up to their waists. Now and on the bridges over the road, all the way out, how did these people know what road these people would be taking, the concert goers? Well, collusion between the Ku Klux Klan and the Westchester County Police. And these gangs are throwing rocks through the windshields of cars and the windows. They're pulling people out of the cars and beating the hell out of them and smashing them up. And Pete Seeger recalled what it was like when a mob surrounded his car. He said people were throwing rocks and stones with the intent to kill. I had 3 little kids in the car, and up until the day of his death, he had buried. I mean, Joel, where are you? Maybe you saw this. Did you see the chimney breast at Pete Seeger's house, where he embedded in his chimney breast a boulder or a large rock that had crashed through the windscreen and almost killed his son Danny, 3 years old, right? And there was another colleague of his named Boots Cassetta, another musician who was in the car, and he remembered what it was like when they started rocking that car back and forth. And he said, I was scared to death. I thought that any minute that damn car was going to tip over. And then we heard a dreadful noise, a crack. A rock had come through the window and hit little Greta in the eyes. And so we drove down the road to try and find a hospital. We were asking, do you know where's the nearest hospital? We stopped and asked one group, where's the nearest hospital? And these people sitting there, they started laughing and cackling. I remember one woman rocking back and forth, slapping her knees like she just heard a good joke. He said, it was unbelievable. Like I imagine it would have been in those early street gang days in Berlin. And all you could see down the road, all the way to the Bronx, it was one long, bloody alley. Well, Woody Guthrie was on a bus with Lee Hayes, and Lee Hayes remembered Woody saying, well, I've seen a lot, but this is just about the worst I've ever seen. And he also remembered Woody's bravery in the face of this mob terror. Woody is leading these frightened people on the bus, singing songs like, we shall overcome, we shall not be moved. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. He also remembered Woody's humor. At one point, Woody is calling out things like, hey, it's getting a little hot in here. Anybody got a rock? We want to open up the windows. And then this huge, naturally, Woody, big mouth. And he said at one point, Woody pinned up a shirt against the window to keep the glass from breaking inwards. And he said, wouldn't you know it, Woody pinned up a red shirt. Anyway, Woody was stung into action. He got back to New York City from Peekskill, and he sat down, and in about 3 weeks, he wrote 21 songs about the Peekskill riots. None of them he never recorded any of them. He typed them up and put them into a little makeshift notebook, which I've seen, called Peekskill Songs. And you may know that about 20 years ago, Woody's daughter Nora began inviting contemporary songwriters into the Woody Guthrie archives to put some of her father's roughly 2,500 unpublished songs to music. And so one of the first she brought in was Billy Bragg, who with the band Wilco recorded 3 albums of Woody Guthrie songs, previously unpublished songs, and they're called Mermaid Avenue, volumes 1 to 3. And one of the first songs that Billy Bragg recorded was Woody's Ode to Paul Robeson and the 30,000 who came to stand shoulder to shoulder with him at Peekskill. Paul Robeson, he's the man who faced down the Ku Klux Klan. Over Peekskill's golfing grounds his words came sounding. And all around him there to jump and clap and cheer, I sent the best I had, my 30,000. Well, the Klansman leader said old Paul would lose his head when 35,000 vets broke up his concert. But less than 4,000 came to side in with the Klan. and around Paul's lonesome oak, my 30,000 and a beer-soaked brassy band went snorkeling around the grounds. 400 noble souls, Westchester's manhood, and you know they looked exactly like fleas on a tiger's back, or lost fish in the waters of my 30,000. Sung and gone, mothers and babies going home. Cops came with guns and clubs and they clubbed and beat 'em. Well, I would hate to be a cop caught with a bloody stick, 'cause you can't bash the brains of 30,000. Each eye you tried to gouge, each skull you tried to crack has got 1,000 friends along this green grass. You will furnish the skull someday, and I'll pass out the guns and clubs to the billion hands that love my 30,000. Each wrinkle on your face, I will know it at a glance. You cannot run or hide, nor duck nor dodge 'em. And your carcass and your deeds will fertilize the seeds of the ones who stood to guard my 30,000. Well, in the early 1950s, the Huntington's disease that Woody inherited from his mother, and which was eventually to kill him, began to take a really severe hold on him. He found that he increasingly couldn't hold a pen. He couldn't play the guitar. He lost his motor coordination. He began to behave more and more erratically. And he thought, like many of his friends, he thought that it was alcoholism, but it wasn't. And he went through because I knew nothing about Huntington's disease back then, really nothing. And he went through such a series of drastic physical changes in such a short time that a lot of his friends at times couldn't even recognize him. Now, one of the signature symptoms of Huntington's disease is the impact that it has upon a person's sense of language, not only speaking linguistics, but also in writing. Now, Woody was always very playful as a writer. He would use weird puns and rhymes all the time, and a lot of folks have begun to question, where does the Huntington's end and Woody's creativity take over, or vice versa? And it got to the point where, as his biographer Joe Klein calls it, it got to the point where Woody was suffering from linguistic anarchy. You know, and I've seen this, I've been in the archives, and Woody had beautiful handwriting, beautiful copperplate handwriting, and you could see it's almost one day in 1952 or 53, you know, one day it's beautiful, and the next day it looks like, the handwriting looks like a spider has jumped in an inkwell and then ran across the page. I mean, really chilling change. This linguistic anarchy. And one of the last marginally coherent letters that Woody ever wrote demonstrates this linguistic anarchy, or the strangeness of language to Woody. But also it demonstrates something very important, that even towards the end of his communicative life, racial justice and anti-racism were uppermost in his minds. It's October, it's the month before the presidential election of 1956, and Woody is writing to his ex-wife Marjorie. He's saying, Eisenhower can't be my big chiefy bossy man till he makes all of my United States, all of my races equal. And he wrote very little of any coherence after that, and he drifted slowly into that darkening twilight of Huntington's disease, which was to claim his life in 1967. But I think by the time he died in October of 67, I think Woody Guthrie had demonstrated something very uplifting. Racists are not born, they are made, and they can be unmade. And I think he was walking proof of that. And by the time he died, long before he died, he'd come to conclude that there was one word that could describe all kinds of segregation, race hatred, and the likes of that. Fascism. Racism was fascism. It was nothing but fascism. And we know what Woody Guthrie felt about fascists, because he said it on a lot of guitars. So I'll leave you now with a song that I think demonstrates where Woody ended up after that long educational journey of his that began in the racist fields of Oklahoma and ended up wherever he died, in Creedmoor State Hospital. You know, wherever it was, ended up, it was on the side of the angels.